How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with John Bollman, Chief Human Resources Officer at Pella Corporation. In part one, John shared his fascinating journey from a labor and employment attorney to an HR leader, and how he learned firsthand that leadership and culture are inseparable. In this second half, John explains how a century-old company continues to innovate through its people, its purpose, and its performance. So I want to come back to a lot of places I want to go here. So let me start with, you made the comment that at Pella you believe, and I certainly support this, it seems somewhat obvious, but that you believe that if we get the culture right, it leads to higher performance. Mm-hmm. Make that connection clearer for our audience. So how specifically does getting the culture right actually help you perform better?
It's a difficult question, and you could ask that question, which I'm sure you do, of lots of people like myself when you're having this conversation. And the easiest answer I can give you is the results of Pella Corporation since the time was taken back in 2016 to put a growth strategy in place and to be very deliberate and focused on defining the culture we need to have in place and continuing to work on the culture from 2016 to present. So Pella Corporation, continues to, frankly, outperform the industry and perform basically certainly outperform the market and outperform the industry. And frankly, it's been challenging times the last 3 years within our industry. Our industry's down significantly, and Pella has been significantly up over the last 3 years, against the market, and arguably based on what we know, because we're privately held, and there's a couple others that are privately held as well, but effectively, performing, at the top of the industry as well. And so that's the evidence I would give you for what it's worth. I can't prove, I don't know how else I can turn to anything else other than, well, let's just take a look at the results.
Well, yeah. So my question is, we can look at the results, and I'm as a big proponent of culture, I'm asked this question often about the return on investment in culture, and I always say, we can look at the results. The hard part about that, of course, is that you can't isolate the variables. You've been doing 15 different things. This isn't the only thing you've done that have led to those results, but it's patently obvious that your results have been better and you've been focused on your culture. But from a more just intuitive perspective, can you think of examples of, like, on a day-to-day basis, I work for Pella, I'm in whatever role I'm in.
Sure.
How is it that the focus on culture is enabling me to do my job better and therefore deliver better results for the company?
Well, I'll give you make a couple comments. First, I just want to turn to a meeting that happened last week. We had Engineering Week last week, and we had engineers from all over the company together for a couple or 3 days. And we had an outside speaker, and that speaker just got into some dialogue back and forth with the team members in our auditorium here, and asked the question of some new team members, why are you here? And then asked some questions of some longer term team members, why, or what they like about Pella and why they're here. And the answer was people and culture. Okay, so it's just an interesting, I found that interesting, so I thought I would mention that, given your question. But I guess the other part of it, honestly, is you think about just the environment here, the collaboration that you see, you see evidence of how people are working together, which is again an example of the culture, because we're in a complex industry. We create a lot more complexity with a number of acquisitions that we brought into the company. And we're trying to optimize, obviously, the business, including, with those acquisitions. And you just see great examples of the quality of the work, and you step back and you say, okay, how's this happening? And it's happening because of in many respects how people are working together. And we put a lot of emphasis on the what's important, but the how's more important. And the how, by the way, will make the what better. And we state that a lot. And the how has a lot to do with our culture. And from a retention standpoint and engagement level standpoint, those are other tangible examples of and evidence of the culture working, for us very well. And I should do engagement surveys and stuff, and so you get a sense of how the people feel about the company and the culture through that.
Right. So let's come back to, you were talking earlier about when you're interviewing people that, they're really attracted to the culture and they've reported that 30, 60, 90 days later, it was exactly what you had said it would be, which is a good thing. As you're trying to find people who will come there, my experience is not everybody's a good fit. And so there are people who I'm assuming could be really nice people, really smart, really capable people who wouldn't necessarily be a fit in the Pella culture. They might be a better fit in a different company's culture. How do you, from a recruiting standpoint, help to identify people? So you're interviewing somebody, some of them are going to be a good fit, some aren't going to be a good fit. How do you decide, how do you help evaluate who might be a good fit in the Pella culture? Yeah,
challenging question, obviously, because you have panels of people that interview, and what we frankly do, and you find happening time and time again, is the group, when they come back together to do the consensus discussion around what they felt about the candidate, it always comes up fit for culture. Okay, so the people are looking for fit for culture. Now, I can't sit here and indicate to you whether there's these specific questions we ask to get sense for whether that individual will fit for culture, because that it's just not that scientific from that standpoint. But people are making their own observations during the course of an interview. By the way, they're doing the same for us. They're evaluating hopefully Pella Corporation and their fit for Pella at the same time. And we take the time to talk about our culture. And during the course of interviews, and I think in some cases, if a candidate, I'm not sure a candidate would self-select out necessarily because they're going to say, I'm not really a good fit for that culture, obviously. But I think you
would hope they would, but they don't normally.
Yeah. I think that they know what they're getting into and why they're joining the company. So there really isn't, there's not a scientific way or easy way to come up with that part. It's a judgment. It's an assessment. I will tell you this. There's some people that come into our organization and they don't work out. And you know what happens when they don't work out? We move on.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, when we move on, we treat the people appropriately with the right sort of transition support, because we are part of making a decision to have that individual join the organization, and we didn't make the best decision. Right. And there's a place for everyone to be successful out there, David. Yeah. And so we will support the people with the right transition and move forward. But if they're not a good fit for our culture, then we'll address it, and we'll address it in a positive and constructive way.
And of course, being a learning organization, you'd also want to look at, so what did we miss in our interviewing that allowed that to happen? And is there anything we might be able to do differently in the future to reduce the chances? You're never going to eliminate it entirely, but can we reduce the number of times that we guessed wrong about that?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a great point. And we talk about that sometimes. I can tell you, I give you examples at the executive level and or higher levels within the organization. We sometimes use an organizational psychologist just to support the review process. So, and in those situations, if it didn't work out, we have a good conversation amongst ourselves and the organizational psychologist to say, what did we miss?
Yeah.
Because remember, those organizational psychologists are also doing some behavioral-based instruments that have an individual take. And of course, they're providing some information to us because they've been certified on those instruments to be able to help us understand. And so, you're going to be right part of the time and hopefully more of the time, and you're going to be wrong part of the time.
Right. And you just want to increase your odds.
Right.
So Let's go to, you mentioned, John, that you've made a few acquisitions in the last few years. And we all know that the biggest, when you look at acquisitions that don't work, almost every single time without fail, the reason they didn't work was culture. It looked good on paper. There was a strategic fit. There was a financial fit, but the culture didn't work the way we all thought it would. So talk about, one, as you do an acquisition, how does Pella evaluate whether this will be a good cultural fit? And two, how do you now integrate the acquisition you just made into the Pella culture?
Yeah. First off, when we do an acquisition, and most of our acquisitions are not, the size varies of the acquisition in terms of how significant it is. So it's not like if I go back to my Whirlpool days when I was heading up HR for North America, at the time $8 billion, and we bought Maytag, which is roughly $5 billion, and almost all the $5 billion in Maytag at the time was North America. Okay, so that was an interesting process to really understand the culture and versus what has had to happen here at Pella, because they're much smaller acquisitions. But during the course of the due diligence, we obviously spend a lot of time, not just with the leadership people, with a broad-based part of the organization where we're able to do so as part of the due diligence and get a real sense for how the company operates, get a sense for the culture. And this is not using a defined process. It's more the opportunity of key people that are experienced at getting out there and doing the due diligence and engaging with members of that organization that we're looking at acquiring and seeing whether or not we think we have any issues from a culture standpoint. Our most recent acquisition was Weather Shield, which is going to be a terrific acquisition for us. And I will tell you that Mark Shield, the principal owner of Weather Shield, and I spent some good time with Mark, he would not have sold his company to anybody other than Pella Corporation, okay? Because of the culture that he had in place at his company and the legacy he wanted to have continue on, and the organization that was the right fit for his organization. We made an acquisition down in Florida. I won't get into some of the specifics here, but I would. But the environment, the leadership environment there was different than how we lead. But we'll be more command and control, and not more of a learning organization and more involvement with team members across and down the organization. But we understood that through the due diligence process. And what we were confident in was that their team members would embrace our culture once we acquired the organization and brought our management style and approach and our culture to bear in the organization. And that's indeed what's happened. The other point I'd probably make as well is we learn from our acquisitions too. And that's the other part, because now that's consistent with our learning culture. So what have they been doing so well, and why have they been so effective, and how do we take, and this isn't necessarily culture, this is things that they've been doing to operate their business, but what learnings can we bring into our business in terms of how we operate and manage going forward to continue to drive success for the company? And you're demonstrating that, to that the acquiree, if you will, which I think is really a nice example of the Pella culture that hopefully helps them want to embrace our company.
Yeah. Do you, thinking about it, so if I were an employee at Pella and how I'm living the culture and how I'm experiencing this, is there any way in which discussion of culture is built into performance reviews?
Oh, there's no question it's built in, because the how is more important than the what. So how does that work in a performance review? I'm meeting with my manager or supervisor, and we're doing our whatever the performance review structure is. Where is culture in that discussion? Yeah, the culture is not it's not as direct as you might think. It gets into the whole notion of it's not just what you do, but how you do your job. And if someone isn't approaching the job in the right way in terms of how they work and collaborate with team members across the organization, in terms of just just again, how they operate or try to get, work and get things accomplished, and they're not necessarily, running over people or not involving or considering, the different things that need to be considered, then that's going to come out in the performance review process. And then we ultimately go through the typical calibration process that it probably exists in many organizations to see how people have been assessed. And as part of that discussion, it comes up, and we even take it up for, all directors in the company end up getting calibrated at the executive level. We're a really small executive team. Today we have 15 people from VP up to the CEO of the company, and we're looking at effectively, 50 or 60 directors across the organization. And we are calibrating, and I'm facilitating that calibration. I can assure you that it just isn't what was accomplished by the person, but we're talking about how. And the last part I would bring up on this, and this may make it a little more focused or germane for you, is that we spend a lot of time talking about behaviors and attributes. And that's where you get the connection on the culture part. And so if the behaviors and attributes of whomever in the organization, and particularly as you grow into more leadership roles, isn't, where it needs to be, well, we want to make sure that individual is focused on how those behaviors and attributes need to evolve and change. And but there could be, accountability and from the performance management process if those behaviors and attributes aren't consistent with who we are as a company.
So take this in a different direction, but Pella it's an interesting study to me, at least, as is it a fifth generation family business now? Is that right?
Well, there is the fifth generation today,
Okay.
but most of them are, a couple may be close to college or something.
Okay, so at least it's a fourth generation business. And which are always, I find, multi-generational family businesses, of which we've worked with many of them, are fascinating studies in this. What role does the Collier family play in culture?
The Kuiper family?
Kuiper family, I'm sorry, the Kuiper family. What role does the Kuiper family play in the culture today?
Yeah, nothing significant really, okay, because we have this three-legged stool in place, best-in-class governance. There's no family members that can work in our company.
Okay.
Which is, a deliberate decision that was made by the family. And the family felt that they needed to get the right management team in place, and obviously the right independent board of directors, of which we have a outstanding board of directors. And of course, we believe we have a strong management team. And of course, the board is responsible for ensuring, particularly, they had the right CEO in place.
Right.
And we do have a couple family members that are on the board of directors. Okay. And I can tell you, culture is very important to the family, very important. So I don't want to minimize that at all. And obviously, there's a lot of evidence of how this culture has continued to evolve and how positive the culture is. And that's, again, means a lot to the family. And I will also add that we get together. Well, first off, we have in our board meetings, we do talk about our culture, by the way, to our board. So I don't want to minimize that as an important element that we cover with our board. And secondly, the shareholder family all comes in one time a year, and we'll talk about different things at the right level with the shareholder family about what's transpiring with the company. And I can assure you that culture is one of the areas that gets covered.
Got it. So one of the questions I'm always curious about with anybody, I do this in all of our interviews, but even just socially, I'm always interested in this too when I talk to anybody. Anybody who's done something for a long period of time, over time, they've learned some things, that they've made some mistakes along the way. They've learned some things if they're a learning organization or a learning person. And I'm always curious about kind of some of that collected wisdom. So I'm going to ask you this in maybe two different ways. One is, as you think back over your career, pre-Pella, with Pella, wherever you want to take it, like, what's the biggest mistake or two that you made around culture and what you learned from that?
I think the most important thing that I've learned through my career is going to be really obvious to you, which is the impact that top leadership has on culture. because I haven't always been in an organization where the level, the leadership understood the impact of their impact on the organization, and then understood the type of culture that needed to be really the identity of the organization. And so I really don't want to specifically call out some of those situations, but I have had the opportunity to see it in action. And that's why, I'm way at the end of my career, David. I'm 68 years old, and I drive about 5.5 hours one way each week just to come here to Pella to work. I wouldn't do that if there wasn't something unique and special going on here. And I attribute a very important part of that to being just who we are as a company, how we operate, our culture. And it's a really great place to think about ending your career, because you don't always get those experiences.
Yeah. So if you were talking to somebody, you were talking to your children or grandchildren, or anybody, it doesn't even have to be your family. See, you were talking to some young person who's new into, whether they came from a legal background or not, they're new into the human resources field, or maybe even leadership. We'll broaden that. They could be into leadership. And they're 29 years old. They're getting into early leadership positions, and they're talking to this 68-year-old wise man named John Bollman, and picking your brain as a mentor. What would be the biggest piece of advice you would give them about culture if they were early in their career?
I'd probably first try to do my best to help them understand, what culture is all about, because they may or may not really have a sense. It may depend on what they've done at that point in time. I might even ask them questions about whether they participated in sports or an extracurricular activity, which might have been a great example for them on good culture or less than positive culture. And it would be interesting for me, again, trying to mentor them, is to get a sense for how we can talk it through to see if they are able to identify elements of a positive culture or where situations where maybe the culture was less than positive, and why. Ultimately, I would probably lead the discussion into the impact that leaders have, and to pay attention, how leadership really thinks about culture, and whether there is really good evidence that it's sincere, and it's an area of focus, and it's embedded within an organization. And I do it from the standpoint that I again, from my own personal experience, I think that you're going to be a lot happier if you're in an organization that has, a culture that is a great fit for you. Believe me, there are cultures that would not be a great fit for a lot of people, myself included, but it may work for other people.
Yes.
That's your own choice. And I don't want to, I don't want to minimize that, but I think it's about trying to be in a place where you can, grow and develop and thrive. Because part of what I want to do is, if I'm going to mentor somebody, is, help them get in a situation that's going to be the right situation for them, or the best possible situation for them.
Yeah. Well, John, this has been a fascinating conversation. It certainly sounds like Pella's a pretty amazing place, and a gift for you that you've been able to have this experience at this stage of your career, and also a gift you've been able to give to Pella to help them to continue to focus on culture. And it's interesting to hear about the relationship that you've experienced and observed between the intensified focus on culture at Pella and the results that have come from that, which is pretty cool to see. So thank you so much for sharing that experience and your story and Pella. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation.
And that's it for today's episode of Culture Architects with John Bollman, Chief Human Resources Officer at Pella Corporation. Folks, if you've been enjoying these conversations, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you have a minute, leave us a review. It helps other culture-minded leaders discover the show. Finally, if you'd like to learn more about building a high-performing culture in your organization, visit us at CultureWise.com. See you next time on Culture Architects.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.